You just used a lot of terms that no one uses outside of your field. Are you saying that the markings are best on the bases?
Yes, that is correct.
So that's the easiest and most accurate way to match them with your test fires?
Yes, correct.
Okay. One of the words that that ballistics experts use is striations. What's a striation?
Sure. So we refer to basically the scratches, the microscopic scratches that are either on the bullet or on the cartridge case as stria or striations. So a less fancy word for that, we'll use scratches this morning.
Now, looking at your results, how did the striations, how did the scratches look on the bullet bases that you received?
So on the 3 bullet bases that I received in this case, the bases all exhibited what we'll call wispy or thin, let's say small scratches that were evenly distributed around the surface of the bases of those bullets.
And that observation is consistent with the observation that was made by Leah Collier as well.
I believe it was, yes.
Now, you have told us you test fired G2 Research rip rounds from the Glock 45 that you were provided, right?
That is correct, yes.
When you looked at the results of your test fires, what did they look like?
So with my test fires, I actually, because of the trocars that I mentioned earlier, I actually tried a couple of things. I knew that the bullet was designed to break apart, but I wanted as much of a surface. I wanted as much of that fingerprint as I could get. So I actually attempted to fill the cavity inside with JB Weld, with Gorilla Glue, super glue, different components to try and keep the bullet held together as much as possible so I could see as much of that surface as possible. And of course I fired some as is. And in all those bases, no matter what I did to the bullet to try and get it to hold together, in all of those cases at the base, I observed some of the small scratches, but I also observed kind of sporadically distributed around the bases some very coarse or thicker, we'll call them big scratches. So on the 3 evidence bases, we had small scratches around. On all of my test fires, we had some small and some big scratches mixed in as well.
Is having a coarse or big scratch out of the ordinary for a Glock?
If we're comparing Glocks, just Glocks in and of themselves, the smaller calibers like the 9s and the 40s, they have more of the small scratches. 45s are a slightly different polygonal rifling. They are 8, right, instead of 6. And so just considering Glocks, in general, 45s have coarser or bigger scratches than the smaller calibers.
Your answer a second ago, you talked about all Glocks. I want to focus it in just on the Glock type that you tested in this
Correct.
case. So I'm going to ask my question again. Just on the 45, which is what you were testing in this case, is it out of the ordinary for a Glock 45 to have coarser or larger scratches?
No, it's not.
Could the bullet bases which you received and the test fires have been fired from the same gun?
It is a possibility.
Let me ask you this. What types of gun match the class characteristics you observed?
Sure. So again, when we're talking about class characteristics on these bullet bases, they had 8 right polygonal rifling, and that is consistent with any Glock, the 45 auto caliber. It's consistent with a 45 gap caliber Glock, and it's also consistent with a line of pistols manufactured by Bersa. They have a series called the Thunder pistols, and so those 3 models of firearms all have that 8 right polygonal rifling.
So you just told us you couldn't exclude, right, the Glock firearm you tested from having fired the shell casing that you examined, right?
I actually went the other way. I conclusively matched the cartridge case to the Glock.
No, I'm sorry. I asked that badly. I got myself like that. Okay. I'm talking about the bullet
Bullets.
bases, right? You said you couldn't exclude the Glock firearm as having fired those bullets with the bullet bases.
That's correct, yes.
But tell us what your conclusion was from examining the bullet bases you received and comparing them to your test fires.
Correct. So in this case, again, we've got those 5 different conclusions backed by the examiner's training experience and their opinion. In this particular case, I was able to conclude what's called the inconclusive C. So what that basically means is, yes, the class characteristics are the same. They have that 8 right polygonal rifling, but there are differences between my test fires and the 3 bases. Those differences, though, are not sufficient or significant enough for me to conclusively go that extra step and say they were not fired by that gun. So it's basically an inconclusive, but it's leaning, there's basically more support for the fact that they would be from a different gun as opposed to that gun.
Is it likely they were fired from that Glock?
It's unlikely that they were fired in the Glock 45 that I was submitted.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.